They say the dead don't speak, but sometimes their absence screams louder than any living voice. Tonight, we're diving deep into a case where the silence of a small town held a devastating truth captive for years, a truth so dark it almost swallowed an entire family whole. This isn't just a story about a missing girl. It's about the chilling secrets that fester beneath the surface of everyday life, and how sometimes the monsters aren't hiding in the shadows but right in plain sight. Get ready, because the echoes of this one might just keep you up tonight. Every town has its heartbeat, its rhythm. For Oak Haven, Indiana, that rhythm was slow, predictable, almost lulling. Nestled deep within a carpet of dense pine forests, Oak Haven was the kind of place where everyone knew your name, your car, and probably your grandmother's maiden name too. It was the kind of place people moved to for peace, for quiet, for the promise of a life free from the big city's harsh glare. But even in the sleepiest corners of America, darkness can find a way to bloom, and in Oak Haven it bloomed on a crisp October night back in 1998. That's when Sarah Jenkins vanished. Sarah wasn't just any girl in Oak Haven. She was the golden child, the kind of daughter every parent dreamed of. Top of her class, captain of the debate team, a smile that could genuinely light up a room. At 17, she had her whole life stretched out before her, seemingly untouched by the small-town monotony that often claimed other teenagers. She was bound for a scholarship to a big university, dreaming of escaping the endless pines for a skyline of glittering possibilities. On October 17th, Sarah went to a Friday night football game, a ritual in Oak Haven. She went with her best friend, Emily. They cheered, they laughed, they did all the normal things teenagers do. Emily later told police that Sarah had a small disagreement with her boyfriend, Mark, after the game. Nothing major, just a silly spat about who said what. Mark walked her to her car, a beat-up old Honda Civic, and watched her drive off. It was just after 10:30 p.m. Sarah was supposed to drive the 10 minutes home, maybe call Emily later and then study for a big chemistry test. But she never made it home, and she never called. When her parents, George and Martha Jenkins, woke up the next morning and found her bed undisturbed, the front door unlocked and her car still missing, a cold dread began to set in. Martha tried calling her friends, then the hospital, her voice growing increasingly frantic with each unanswered ring. George, a stoic man who worked at the local lumber mill, initially tried to calm his wife, convinced Sarah was just being a typical rebellious teenager. But deep down, he knew. Sarah wasn't like that. Not his Sarah. By noon, the Oak Haven Sheriff's Department was involved. Sheriff Miller, a man whose face seemed permanently etched with the weariness of small-town justice, knew the Jenkins family well. He knew Sarah. The initial search was swift and comprehensive. Deputies, volunteers, even half the football team combed the woods surrounding the Jenkins home, looking for any sign. Helicopters buzzed overhead, their powerful beams cutting through the thick canopy. Nothing. Not a trace of Sarah or her old Honda Civic. It was like she had driven off the face of the earth. The first few days were chaos. Mark, Sarah's boyfriend, was the immediate focus of suspicion. He was brought in, questioned for hours. He broke down, swore he loved Sarah, swore he had no idea where she was. His alibi for the rest of the night checked out. He'd gone straight home after dropping Sarah off, and his parents confirmed he was there. Emily, too, was questioned extensively. She recounted the football game, the small argument, her last words with Sarah. She was heartbroken, devastated. The police looked into everyone Sarah knew, every friend, every casual acquaintance. They dug into her life, looking for hidden enemies, secret lovers, anything that could explain such a sudden, absolute disappearance. But Sarah Jenkins' life on the surface was an open book, clean, untroubled. Weeks turned into months. The yellow ribbon tied around a pine tree outside the Jenkins house, a symbol of hope, slowly faded under the relentless Indiana sun and then the biting winter winds. The flyers with Sarah's smiling face, once plastered on every storefront, began to peel and tear. Some said she ran away. Others, darker voices, suggested something more sinister, something unspeakable that had happened out in those vast, silent woods. The Jenkins family became a ghost of their former selves. Martha cried herself to sleep most nights. George, his shoulders slumped under an invisible weight, stopped going to work as often. Their once vibrant home became a shrine to their lost daughter. Her room left untouched, a heartbreaking tableau of a life interrupted. The annual missing persons report from the state police listed Sarah Jenkins every year, a stark reminder of a life never accounted for, a mystery that gnawed at the edges of Oak Haven's collective conscience. Time, as it always does, marched on. 2 decades passed. Technology evolved. DNA analysis became more sophisticated. Database cross-referencing was revolutionized. But still, Sarah remained lost to the world. Then, in the spring of 2019, 21 years after Sarah vanished, a peculiar incident shattered Oak Haven's fragile peace once more. A group of teenagers, daring each other to explore a forgotten, overgrown logging trail deep in the old growth pines, stumbled upon something unsettling. A car, mostly swallowed by undergrowth and rust, its paint faded beyond recognition. It was almost completely hidden, nestled in a deep ravine, practically invisible from any main road or even from the air. Curiosity overriding caution, they peered inside the shattered windows, and that's when they saw it. Skeletal remains still strapped into the driver's seat. The Oak Haven Sheriff's Department, now under the leadership of a new, younger sheriff named Thompson, was immediately called to the scene. The car was quickly identified as Sarah Jenkins' old Honda Civic. The small town held its breath. Forensics teams swarmed the site, meticulously documenting everything. It was a painstaking process. The car had been there for over 2 decades, exposed to the elements, undisturbed. The skeletal remains were carefully extracted. Dental records quickly confirmed what everyone already suspected. The remains belonged to Sarah Jenkins. The discovery brought a tidal wave of grief and renewed determination. Sarah was found. But the mystery of how she ended up there and who was responsible was still wide open. Sheriff Thompson, a man who had grown up hearing the whispers about Sarah Jenkins, vowed to find answers. The first order of business was a thorough forensic examination of the car and the remains. They found no obvious signs of a crash, no twisted metal that would indicate a major accident. The car had simply been driven into the ravine, almost deliberately. The autopsy revealed a single devastating truth. Sarah had not died from a car crash. The medical examiner found a small, clean entry wound at the base of her skull, consistent with a single gunshot. The bullet was still lodged in her skull. It was a cold, calculated murder. With Sarah's remains recovered, the case, once a cold file, was now red hot. Sheriff Thompson knew he had to revisit everything, every interview, every piece of evidence from 1998, but with a fresh pair of eyes and the advanced tools of modern forensics. They meticulously processed the car. What they found within the rusted shell of the Honda Civic was critical: an old, slightly damaged cell phone charger, not Sarah's. A small, distinctive keychain with a faded emblem of the local high school's rival team, and most significantly, trace DNA evidence on the steering wheel that did not belong to Sarah. The DNA was a game changer. They ran it through national databases, but nothing. It was too old, too degraded, or belonged to someone not in the system. But it was a lead, a specific profile they could compare against. Sheriff Thompson decided to re-interview everyone, starting with the original suspects: Mark, the boyfriend, and Emily, the best friend. Both were now adults, living quiet lives. Mark was a carpenter in a neighboring town, married with kids. Emily was a teacher in Oak Haven. Mark was cooperative, but visibly shaken. He recounted the night again, the small argument watching Sarah drive away. His story remained consistent. Emily, however, reacted differently. When shown the photo of the recovered car, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. Her eyes darted, her hands trembled. She repeated her original story, but Thompson noticed subtle hesitations, a nervousness that hadn't been present in her initial grief-stricken testimony. During the re-interview with Emily, Sheriff Thompson casually mentioned the items found in the car: the strange charger, the rival high school keychain. Emily's eyes widened at the mention of the keychain. She swallowed hard. That belonged to my brother," she mumbled, almost too softly to hear. Emily had a younger brother, David. David was 2 years younger than Sarah and Emily, a quiet, somewhat troubled kid who was often overshadowed by his older sister's brightness. In 1998, he would have been 15. He'd barely been a footnote in the original investigation. He was just the quiet younger brother, always lurking in the background. Thompson's team immediately looked into David. His alibi from 1998 was flimsy. His parents vaguely recalled him being home, but couldn't be sure. He was a teenager after all. Now, David was a truck driver, living a solitary life a few states away. Sheriff Thompson made the trip himself. He interviewed David, a man who seemed to carry a perpetual cloud of gloom. David was evasive, his answers short and clipped. He denied any involvement, any knowledge. But the DNA test results came back. The DNA found on the steering wheel of Sarah's car matched David's. It was a direct hit. Confronted with the DNA evidence, David finally cracked. The story that spilled out was a chilling tale of jealousy, obsession, and a moment of unfathomable rage. He admitted he had always been secretly, obsessively in love with Sarah. He watched her, idealized her. But Sarah only ever saw him as Emily's annoying little brother. On that night in 1998, after the football game, he had seen Sarah and Mark arguing. After Mark left, David, who had been hiding in the shadows of the parking lot, approached Sarah's car. He saw his chance. He tried to tell her how he felt. Sarah, probably flustered from her argument with Mark, and maybe a little annoyed by David's sudden appearance, laughed him off, gently told him she saw him as a brother. That laughter, that gentle rejection shattered something inside David. In his twisted mind, it wasn't just a rejection, it was humiliation. He pulled out a small handgun he had secretly taken from his father's old hunting stash, an old, rusty .22 caliber pistol. He always carried it for some unknown adolescent fantasy. He pushed the car into the ravine, convinced it would never be found, swallowed by the relentless embrace of the pines. He walked home, cleaned the gun, and put it back, his secret buried deep within him. His sister, Emily, had suspected something. She had noticed David acting strangely in the days after Sarah disappeared. She saw the rival high school keychain, a cheap souvenir, on his key ring and had dismissed it as him being edgy. She'd even mentioned it to him once, asking why he had it, and he'd mumbled something about finding it. The charger, too, she remembered seeing it once in his room, but she never pieced it together. The truth was too awful to contemplate about her own brother. Emily, consumed by guilt and fear, had buried her vague suspicions for 2 decades, hoping they were wrong. She never knew the extent of his actions, until the cold, hard facts laid bare. David was arrested and charged with Sarah Jenkins' murder. His confession, detailed and agonizing, brought a grim closure to the Jenkins family. They had finally found Sarah. They finally knew who had taken her from them. But the truth, as it often is, was a double-edged sword. It brought peace, but also the unbearable pain of knowing the brutal final moments of their golden girl, and the chilling realization that the killer was not some phantom monster, but a boy from their own community, a boy they had watched grow up.